Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. I'm here with my good friend Scott, and we are talking Michigan breweries, Michigan beer, and the Michigan Great Beer State. Welcome, Scott. How are things in your world?
Thanks, Fred. Good to see you again. Things in my world are going fine. It's that time of year here in late 2021 when we're planning our annual conference for January, kind of the beer industry conference, and we've started selling tickets and are making plans for our annual Winter Beer Festival that I'm pretty sure will be happening in February at the LMCU ballpark in Comstock Park.
Yeah, it's an interesting time of the year. I feel like historically it used to feel like the retooling time and a little bit of the off season, but between Northern Michigan and the conference, it's sort of full steam ahead in a lot of ways as well. People are out and about, and we're getting ready for both those events. So no rest for the weary. We're hard at it.
Yeah, it always seems like kind of a push to get through the end of the year. There's always a lot of end of year stuff. The Guild's business year ends on December 31st. And so there's certainly behind the scenes work going on, and feels like we just finished festival season and would like to catch our breath. And there's not a great opportunity for that in December or January.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about location? So we've held the what is now Michigan's Great Beer State Conference, and you've mentioned in previous episodes for many years we've been partnered with Master Brewers Association District Michigan, and we've added a partner with Michigan State University Extension, who previously had held the Great Lakes Hop and Barley Conference. There's a longer intro to a question than I realized, but this has been a conference that's moved about here and there. It hasn't always been at one place, but it's had many years at the Radisson in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And this year we're up in Traverse City at Grand Traverse Resort. Can you talk a little bit about why it moves and what you're excited about coming into this year?
Yeah. So more often than not, we are in Kalamazoo at the Radisson Plaza Hotel. I'm probably not getting the name exactly right, but they do a great job. It's fun being in Kalamazoo. That property is well suited for our needs, and we our conference has grown to the size where it doesn't fit in a lot of hotel conference center venues, and we're really not the size that we want to go into a great big conference hall either. So we've got a fairly limited options given that, and we really like being in Kalamazoo at the Radisson, but it's nice to not be the same place year after year after year. And so we like to look at options outside of there, and we've looked for a while at the Grand Traverse Resort and talked about going there. So I'm excited to be there. It's technically an Acme, but that's right near Traverse City. It's a great venue. It's a really nice facility, and we're having a good time working out plans with those folks. This is our first time through specific planning with them. So it's good to get kind of outstate and get a change of venue, a fresh scenery, if you will. So that's why we're going to be in the Traverse City area for 2022.
Yeah, I think we always look forward to getting together and seeing all the old and new faces and just having that together time. And I think seeing that we needed to go virtual last year and only had a couple of festivals this year, that's just even more important than ever to get in the same room and spark all that camaraderie that we love about our community. So looking forward to that. And it's right around the corner. So
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning that while it is an industry conference and trade show, that's mostly who the intended audience is. It's certainly open to anybody, and anybody's welcome to attend and participate. While it most likely does appeal to folks who are working in the beer industry, either directly or through a company that provides goods and services.
yeah, and it's 2 days plus a trade show, which would be a third day. After the trade show, it's 2 days of 4 educational tracks. So there's speakers on the brewing track, on the business track, on the hops track, and on the malt and barley track. So there are 4 concurrent sort of communities of education happening. And you'll have a very full couple of days, plus the Great Beer State dinner on Thursday. So lots of fun. Look forward to seeing everybody there.
Yes, looking forward to it.
So we can move right on, since we're going to hold off on kicking off the next round of Brewers Dozen until the first of the year. We'll jump right into our guest. We talked to Terry Doyle of the Vierling restaurant and Marquette Harbor Brewery. That's up in Marquette. And we talked to him this September of 2021, adjacent to the UP Fall Beer Festival. We had featured Chumley and the Rising Tide, and and in the podcast, his interview from 2018, who's the brewer there. And it was great to talk to Terry and get a little more history for his operation in downtown Marquette. And they opened as a restaurant in 1985, and then the Brewpub was added in 1995. I just find it fascinating. What were your thoughts hearing that back? A lot of friendly names and stories, I'm sure, engaged.
Yeah, and
from your memory.
It's another one of these fun stories. Terry is, he's not a big personality in our industry, but he's influential nonetheless. He was one of the early brew pubs. They're still operating successfully. They've got probably the longest continuous tenure of a brewer there with Chumley of probably of any brewery in the state, certainly near the top if they're not at the top. And they're not in one of the first communities that you would think would have a brewery, yet they're very early on. It's interesting to hear, Terry, when the idea was first brought up, he felt like, well, if somebody's going to have a brewery in their restaurant, I think it's going to be me. And so he went to work on it and got it done pretty quickly. And there they are, long-term successful brewery with really good beer, great food, fun atmosphere in their kind of historic location that, he turned back into sort of the saloon that it had been in a previous life. And it was really fun listening to Terry talk about that story again. I talked about some things that I just didn't know and I found interesting.
Yeah, and I think we talk a lot about how breweries and communities and revitalization of downtowns, and we talk about that relationship. And sometimes it's, maybe it's not that important to know the chicken or the egg, which fed each other, but there is a correlation where breweries have been really good for the revitalization of downtowns. And you hear, this is a story going back to 95 and really 85 if you think about the restaurant in general. But I was fascinated hearing it's also kind of bringing to life a downtown from an industry point of view, and where it sort of, was, forgot the term he used, but it was sort of, not deserted, but really not a retail space. Everybody was.
Yeah, I think he called the downtown area desolate.
Desolate.
And so you go to Marquette now, and it's a fun downtown. It's got shops and restaurants and plenty going on. And you go back a number of years, and it was not quite so charming.
It wasn't the case, and I think so. Just encourage you to listen with that in mind, because I think here you have restaurant owner turned brew pub, hand in hand with the community as it went through these phases for now more than 30 years. So I think it's a great story. It's a testament to what our places can be, the importance of the gathering place, the saloon, the tasting room, the brewery, the restaurant. I think this is a great story in that regard. And he's got a great take on it and has really developed something special. So glad to.
Another interesting tidbit. For anybody listening who's never been to Marquette, it's a great town to go visit some breweries there in the surrounding area. But it Terry references a few times their blueberry wheat beer, which, it is probably like a flagship beer for them. And I know that it's not necessarily the favorite of the brewer, but it's one of those things where, us folks who are beer geeks, drink a lot of beer, brewers, a lot of times your best-selling, most popular beer is maybe not your favorite one to make, but it's a workhorse that keeps people coming back, that delights all kinds of guests, that puts dollars in the cash register. And their blueberry wheat, they started it. And, it's just a light wheat beer with some blueberry flavor. It's very tasty. And they garnish it with frozen blueberries, which, if you've never seen it before, they get CO2 bubbles on them, and the blueberry kind of will float off the bottom and then turn over and release the bubbles and sink. You get these bobbing blueberries in their blueberry wheat. And yes, it's gimmicky and it's okay to chuckle about it. But it's, become something that other breweries, a lot of the breweries up there offer a blueberry wheat. I think it started at the Vierling, and I've seen it at other breweries in the Lower Peninsula too. So it's, one of those things that you don't necessarily get to decide. It just kind of happens. So you've got this noteworthy blueberry wheat beer at the Vierling.
Yeah, it is noteworthy and prideful, and and it's spread a lot of love and a lot of influence as well. And I think this is maybe I'll wrap my part of this intro just thinking that this is my occasional shout out to the UP. I think on paper the Upper Peninsula would not have been expected to be this sturdy engine for craft beer. And while if you go away from a few of the cities, I'm sure for years it wasn't. There's lots of different things up there, but we talked a lot about this on a couple of the different episodes, but the breweries and brew pubs that started in the UP are there and have been cranking along, creating culture, supporting beer culture steadily for our history. And it's amazing with the population base they have and the distance they have and some of the challenges they have. I think it's no small thing that the UP Brewers have been as steady and successful and influential as they have been. I think it's a huge thing that's worthy of paying attention to and giving them a shout out for. So thank you, Brewers of the UP.
Yeah, cheers to that. I guess I don't have a lot more to add other than it's a great interview. Encourage everybody to listen to Terry Doyle talk about the Vierling Saloon and Marquette Harbor Brewery.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, thanks for sitting with us today.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
And I'm looking forward to hearing your point of view because, we're getting close to celebrating 25 years of the Michigan Brewers Guild, which means we're 27 years or something like that into your history and just a little bit more of where brew pubs became legal in Michigan.
Yes.
And so I guess I want to start. The bit I know is that you and Christy opened up the Vierling 10 years ahead of being a brewery.
Right.
And so I just wonder what it was like to kind of see that coming and like what gave you, because tell me the story about jumping on that license change and what was the decision to become a brewery?
Well, for 10 years we did breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which was really hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, back then we had great employees and so on and so forth, and we still do. We have wonderful employees. But one of the ladies, Ham's, I can't remember her name, but she was the head of the DMA, the Downtown Merchant Association. And she says, well, what Marquette needs is a brew pub. I go, well, wait a minute. If somebody's going to do a brew pub, I'm going to do a brew pub. So then from there we started doing our research. We would go down to Milwaukee and we'd go to Lakefront Brewery.
And what year is this?
This is probably early 95.
95.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 95. I think we brewed and served the last day of 95. Illegally, mind you, because they sent my license, but I was supposed to sign them and send them back, and then they were supposed to give me my approval. And so I called the guy who was the head of it. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he said, wait a minute, because I said, aren't I supposed to be paying beer tax? He goes, well, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be selling your beer yet. So, but he was really gracious about it.
But when did your research start for that?
It started in early spring of 95.
Oh, okay. So within the calendar year,
Yeah, right.
you
I
were
got
researched and opened.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we got a brewery sent from Budapest, Hungary,
Yeah.
and it was a 5-barrel unit, which was half the price of a 10-barrel unit.
Wow.
And when it landed in New York City on the pier, on the docks, they gave me the weight, and it was $19 and some odd cents per pound
Oh my goodness.
of stainless steel. I called them, I says, hey, wait a minute, you guys must have this way underpriced. And they go, yeah, we don't sell those 5-barrel systems any longer. So we got a really sweetheart deal. And through the years, we've added fermenters and storage tanks and stuff like that. But it's worked really well for us. And the brewery equipment is amazing because I think we've changed out one pump
Wow.
in since 95.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I mean, that is, when you can buy equipment, and the brewery equipment made in Budapest, Hungary, is fabulous. And it was made in an old Soviet Union boiler factory, and it went on a tram. It was built on a tram,
Wow.
just like the Henry Ford would have done.
Yeah.
And people worked on it as it went down the assembly line.
That's amazing.
But we picked up
And how in the world did you find that? I mean,
I just did a hell of a lot of shopping, and then I found a 5-barrel because I wanted to. Well, at that time you couldn't sell beer out the door.
right?
We were so early on the stage, and like a half a year later, they allowed us to sell it out the door. Well, if I would have known that,
Yeah.
we would have been at least a 7-barrel or maybe a 10-barrel. But the 5-barrel, with all the fermenters we have now and serving device, allows us a large variety.
Yeah.
We have 10 different.
Keep brewing different
Yeah,
styles.
and
Move through it
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Keep it fresh.
yeah. I mean, we lose a little bit on labor and stuff like that, but it's well worth it. And Chumley is such a fabulous brewer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so.
So what did it look like? What was the reception like? I mean, so
was bad.
you've got, the Downtown Marquette Association interested in the hypothetical of wouldn't it be great to have a brewery? But it's also 95. What does the scene look like, and what do people think how many people thought you were crazy when you started doing
Not
it?
many people. They thought I was more crazy when I opened this place in 85. They thought, no, you should be out by the mall. Your restaurant should be you out on the mall. Yeah, the malls were hopping up. And downtown was desolate. I mean, that was a coal field down there where the beer fest is going to be tomorrow. We got a great reception that New Year's Eve because we started serving on New Year's Eve.
Let's stay on 85 for a second.
Yeah, no,
So
85 or 90.
85. So
Yeah.
what gave you that commitment to say, I'm betting on downtown. I'm gonna start the Vierling right here.
The availability
and
of this
stick to it.
spot. And I had been working overseas, and I would work 3 months on and a month and a half off. So I was in the wintertime, I'd go to Europe and so on and so forth. And I'd be in the English pubs and the Irish pubs. And I thought, wow, I mean, this building was perfect
Yeah.
for an Irish pub. And when I bought it, was the Finlandia restaurant. And the dining room ended right at this wall here, and then the kitchen was back in the in the back area, and the restrooms. And over where the kitchen and the restrooms are now was the bakery area.
Oh wow.
And I was on the Little Presque Isle, on the beach of Little Presque Isle, with my girlfriend at the time. She became my wife. I thought, boy, the cooks in the Finlandia restaurant have the best view in town. So I came in and I paced it off, And and I was working at another restaurant. I had left working for Bendix Corporation for 11 years. And I bunched it because I was being moved around all over the place. I spent the last 5 years in Nigeria, West Africa. Wow. That's where I was working 3 months on and 1 month and a half off. But so I started pacing and I go, wow. So I approached them as Mr. X and I wanted to buy the place. And they were going through some difficult times. So they were entertaining the sale. So finally I had to
Which
disclose.
is part of that whole downtown atrophy.
Well, the downtown was still desolate. It wasn't even considered a Main Street district or something like that. So when I finally sat down with them, we were $10,000 apart on the selling price. And I got up and I was walking around and I looked down and they had all the historic photos, in the dining area. And the photo said, the Vierling Saloon and Sample Room, now the Finlandia restaurant. So I said, so this was the Vierling Saloon back in 1883? And they go, yeah, it was, it ran through till Prohibition. So I sat down for a minute and I said, all right, you got a deal. Because I knew then I could get the help from the Historical Society, from the state of Michigan. I got a free liquor license, so on and so forth. And I also called Louis Vierling, and it was Louis Vierling IV.
Wow.
And I said, Louis, I'm going to take the old Finlandia restaurant and turn back into the Vierling Saloon. I says, what do you think about that? And he says, oh, that'd be great. He says, I have some old stained glass and some oil paintings that were in the saloon.
Wow.
And he says, I'll sell them to you. So we had our decorum,
Wow.
but it took us 9 months to get a clean bill of sales.
Wow.
Yeah, and Elwood Manson actually helped me get a clean bill of sales because they owed some back taxes, employee back taxes, which could have been very harmful for us if we had picked it up without the proper discharges.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But so it becomes the Vierling again, this historic landmark.
It was very sparse at the time, though.
But you're in a sort of difficult era of downtown history.
Actually, we took off. We were profitable within half a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that parallel to the arc of downtown Marquette, or was it a seed to it, or how did that?
We had a restaurant that would serve the business people and the tourists both. Where before it was just the business people. It was just donuts and a patty melt and a pasty or something like that. Where we went full bore. We went with the whitefish dinners and stuff. So people, really took to a shine to it. Dinner was difficult because my liquor license was delayed by a year. Because it was we opened in October 3rd of '85. I didn't get my liquor license to October of '86. That's why I went into breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
And breakfast was so popular, especially on Saturday morning. I'd have to sit by this big old coffee machine and make pot after pot after pot. It was crazy. But people, and at that time, the banks, First of America Bank had 119 employees. MFC had 220 employees. If you weren't here by 5 after 12 at lunchtime during the workday, you were out of luck.
Yeah.
So, and then the tourists started coming, but then we put the brewery in, and then people objected to the beer. They said, no, I don't like Brewpub beer.
Yeah.
Because all the money people went into, everybody was going to make a fortune at starting a brewpub or a brewery. And they were making the beer from the money end of it. Where then finally they phased out, they sold out, and people who loved beer started making the beers.
Yeah.
And then that's when it turned around. But it took, I would say, 5 years before the good people got a hold of the equipment and the build-outs. And, like the Big Buck Brewery, that turned out to be a mess. They had like 5 or 10 partners, and there were a bunch of monkey business going on, but they built one hell of a facility. And Grant used to work for Big Buck.
Oh, yeah.
But he left, not surprisingly so, but
And so being in the Upper Peninsula, I began selling beer up here for Bell's in '95, and I loved the scene up here. And there were a few sort of bastions of craft microbrew support. And I feel like Houghton and Marquette were really, and the island a little bit, were sort of three little dots where there were some beer fans doing, something beyond light lagers, but everywhere else was in a different era. So what was it like balancing that through those years of sort of bringing people up? You were on the frontier of bringing brewed beer to the Upper Peninsula overall, so that had to be a learning curve for
it was.
Your customers.
It was, and we had people that, like I said, they wanted the Buds and the Bud Lights, but we only carried Bud and Bud Light, and a non-alcoholic beer, and the other beers, you had this beer or not. Interesting story, a beer judge this is a little ahead of the story, but this guy came over from a beer judge from Denver for brewing judging the big beer event.
Yeah.
And he came through the door and he said, I was bartender at the time. He says, what's your most popular beer here? I said, God, the IPA is good, but I think it's probably the blueberry wheat. And he goes, he says, I don't like fruit beers. This is back probably 97 or 98. But he said, I says, so he went back and he had his lunch, and all that. And I think he probably had the sample. He came back and he came up to me, he says, you changed my mind about fruit beers. And I thought that was a real home run.
Yeah.
And the blueberry wheat began our real heyday. They were having a blueberry festival. And they came to us and they said, can you make something blueberry? Whether it's pie or whatever. And Chumley started thinking about it, and he goes, I think I can get some really good blueberry extract out of Vermont. So he bought a 5-gallon pail of blueberry extract, and he made the blueberry wheat. Well, it was a home run. And we took it off. We put on the peach wheat, and everybody just clamored for it. We got it. So the blueberry wheat has been a main staple. And people come through the door hearing that we have the blueberry wheat. And I've had other blueberry wheats around the upper Midwest that tastes like cough syrup.
Yeah.
I think that you got to have a quality blueberry.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess maybe you could describe the arc a little bit as, what do you think were the components of Marquette downtown coming back to life and the brewery scene? So those early years, a number of breweries opened in the Upper Peninsula.
Right.
What was it like as a community started to develop, and what do you think that did for the downtowns across the
Well, I'm not
market?
sure, because the second brewery, Hereford and Hops, was the first.
Okay.
And then we were right on their tails. And then what is the one out in Ishpeming?
Jasper Ridge.
Jasper Ridge was out in a mall setting, off on the highway. So that didn't do anything for their downtown area. But at that time, we were the only restaurant downtown, primarily. I mean, there was the Portside Inn, but people would walk to the end of the block and look around and say, what is there to do in Marquette? It was pretty sparse.
And
But
what did that change look like? Like, what do you think the timeline was for?
the change has only been probably the last 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. When the Landmark went in, they did real well in the beginning, and then the Hampton, when that moved in, and then all the apartment buildings. I mean, it's a real, being on the corner of Front and Main has its advantages.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But our beer sales have dropped off because you have Black Rocks and you have the Ord Dock, and they're beer gardens, where before we were kind of known as a beer garden. I mean, people really appreciated our beers, and they still do, mind you. But we're primarily a dinner spot at night, and people love wine, of course, and then the cocktails. Cocktails have really advanced.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be at the beginning it was gin and tonic or a Manhattan or an old fashioned, and that was whatever. But and then we had our beers, of course.
Yeah. So what's it like having Black Rocks and Ordock and
Well,
is there a lot of brewery? I mean, do you feel people are coming to the area to tour the breweries and go
I
from
think
one to the other?
Well, Black Rocks is such a beautiful little setup.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's a wonderful beer garden. And when they put that in that old house, and they had like the mini brewery, I thought, these guys are nuts. How are they going to even get approved? I mean, water's going to be pouring through the floors.
Yeah.
But they pulled it off, and what a home run they've gotten.
That throw you back to the early days of the Vierling and hearing of you opening a brewery when you saw the other startups coming? Did you have a little sense of nostalgia of what it was like to figure it out?
I pretty much am a wino, to be truthful.
Yeah.
So I really didn't follow the brewery scene that much. But I've only been to Black Rocks a couple of times because I'm getting older, and the hectic gaiety of the restaurant business is enough for me when I'm here.
Yeah.
Let alone but gosh, the brew fests have been fabulous. I mean,
that was the next thing I was going to ask about is life before and after the UP Fall Beer Festival.
Well, I remember the first brew fest they had the Rover, that little restaurant that they took over that had been defunct, and they took it over. Well, they had the afterglow of it.
Oh, yeah.
And what a disaster that came, because all these, I watched them close from the windows. I watched them close the festival down, and all these hundreds of people march up the hill and hit the doors of the Rover, where we have to monitor the people very closely. People are getting a little bit better. They're more responsible, but how many years has the Brew Fest been going on?
Jeez. 12?
Yeah, I think so.
I think 09 was the first one, 08 or 09.
But people, I've had people, a cute little couple sat in the window box and ordered their 2 pints of beer, and I turned around and they left money on the table. They left. Because you just, when you sit down and get seated.
It's over.
It's over, yeah, it was over. It was so cute.
Do you think that's changed? Do you think the overall awareness and enthusiasm for brew pubs and breweries has changed after that festival coming up here?
I think there's a lot of brewery. You can get brewed beer, wonderful brewed beer in any restaurant now. So I don't know if people, we're primarily known as a really good restaurant, I would hope.
Yeah.
And then, maybe, then the blueberry wheat, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the people really love his IPAs and so on and so forth. But we're primarily running on the graces of good food and the great kitchen staff, and then obviously the great beer too.
But I feel like you're also a hallmark. I know every brewery person that I talk to, everybody's visiting the Vierling at some point over this weekend.
Because of Chum. Well, all the people that are in the brew know. Yeah, they love Chumley's beer.
I feel like the network, for me, as somebody whose beer career started down below, and I was one of the, we were one of the few breweries that had business up in the UP.
Yeah.
So I'd been making trips for years. But then after the festival, I felt like there was a connection, because brewers and breweries like Chumley and the Vierling couldn't necessarily make it down to Ypsilanti in the summer.
Right.
But I feel like when the Fall Beer Festival happened here, all of a sudden the state was connected and more breweries knew each other from top to bottom. Yeah. Instead of just the southern
regional,
breweries kind of making up the pulse of the guild.
Yeah.
So I felt like
well, Chumley,
kind of what it is.
He's reached out. In fact, he's helped at Tequamina Brewery when they first started.
Yeah.
And he helps out Grant, when he was in Jasper Ridge, and he's a kind soul. And he knows a lot of the people. They used to go down occasionally down to Grand Rapids area or Kalamazoo.
And what a feat to have your opening brewer 26 years later.
Yeah, really,
I don't know what the question is there, other than I find it remarkable. Any thoughts you have to share about either the value of having Chumley along all these years, or or advice to other breweries about maintaining a relationship like
treat
that?
your people well, you know. We're fortunate, you know, our margins are good, you know. I mean, people have to be, and the equipment is, like I say, it's wonderful equipment.
Yeah.
So we haven't had to throw money at the equipment or like that. And Chumley's very good. He's very conscious of the product and the material he uses, and and we sell a lot of pints.
Have you had other surprises about beers that worked that you didn't think would work, or vice versa, things that
I think they've all worked.
you were sure that worked and didn't catch on as much?
Yeah, you know, I think he sticks to the main core beers, you know, the stouts and the porters and the IPAs, but he makes a laid back IPA, which I'm drinking now, which is lower in alcohol, but it has the double IPA. So he sticks to the core beers, and they're all quite good. I mean, they're great.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I have people that leave work and they come here and they drink his beer exclusively.
Yeah.
You know, his beers are wonderful.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that unit is really a sweet little 5-barrel unit. He's not making a 20 barrel or something, or a 15 barrel
Yeah.
that can get lost, you know, can get diluted or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Do you have any? What do you think when you look ahead into the future in terms of your hopes for Vierling, your hopes for downtown Marquette or the beer community?
Well,
what's next?
This area is hot as a pistol. I mean, all the condominiums they're putting in, all the hotels. I mean, it's really ramped up. I mean, we're going to be busy every day, all day long, all year long.
Yeah.
So it's, and the brewery, the beer goes right along with it, you know. So it's I mean, it's just a home run all the way around.
Yeah. And do you think, if you think about other cities, maybe a city that doesn't have a brewery or brewpub or any kind of brewing, what would be the advice you'd give to a city about whether they should or what a brewery can bring to a downtown Main Street?
I think Negaunee on the cusp of getting their first brewery.
Oh yeah.
And that will, I mean, they've done really well. I mean, and it's not that far from Marquette. And the bike trails, the biking is very big for Marquette.
Yeah.
I mean, the fat tire bike, and you know, they can bike in the wintertime, you know, and it's a biking haven. And Negaunee is, I mean, bikes and beers go together really well.
Absolutely.
And I think that brewery up there is just going to, I mean, I Main Street, if I was younger, Main Street of Negaunee, I would have jumped on that.
Yeah.
You know.
And there seems to be an amazing staying power here because, like, you know, again, just looking at the Upper Peninsula and you think about the amount of space between cities and the population or lack thereof in some cases. And I think in the mid-90s, one would have seemed reasonable to say, well, I don't know if UP's ready for these brew pubs. But I think that restaurant, the Brewpub restaurant model, you know, those 6, I think Chumley calls them the original 6 microbreweries and brewpubs, they're all still open.
Yeah,
like there's been a remarkable staying power to the breweries in this market, which you would think would be challenging through the 90s. I'm just amazed that everybody's around and thriving.
Almost all the restaurants have survived.
Yeah.
I think because there's been a long, steady growth. There hasn't been overabundance of chain restaurants moving in.
Yeah.
You know, gobbling up that seat for lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the growth has been metered really well. I think whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah.
I think the DDA has done a wonderful job. I mean, the whole LSCP, everybody who's promoted this area has done a fabulous job.
Yeah.
I mean, the balance is just incredible. I mean, it started off with the sled dog races and the biking and the snowmobiles. At one time they wanted snowmobiles to run down through downtown Marquette. And I go, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, they're pretty noisy, you know, and clamorous. And,
Yeah.
so I think it's just been wonderful what, the powers that be have done to this area.
Yeah. Well, it's terrific, and I really appreciate everything you've done. I think it's such a, important place, and what a gift to have restored the Vierling
Yeah.
and contributed to restoring downtown.
Yeah.
So, and you're 26 years. No, you're longer than that. 26 years as a brewery, 36 as a restaurant.
Yeah, right, exactly.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Hang in there this weekend.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll get back to some time off.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.